a new guidebook just came out from Antony Blinken called Diplomacy for Dummies. And apparently, when you are attacked, the thing to do is go home, cover, and hope they will stop doing it, and hope that you can get out of this as soon as possible, and you won't have to actually do anything about it. This is actually not true, but if it actually happened, I wouldn't be surprised. Welcome to the reality show. Today, joining me is Anders. Hi, Anders.
Hi.
Nicolas
Hello.
and Nathan.
Hey,
And we will be talking about some of the recent quotes from Antony Blinken and his idea of how to resolve the conflict. He's been talking mainly about Hezbollah, how to basically solve this conflict. But we might even, if there's time, we might even talk about a bit more broadly about Gaza because he has been connecting Hezbollah with Gaza, and I think they are connected, and his main idea was to basically go home and cover. So the first quote I want to discuss is, or something that he thought is, so from the article it says, Blinken thinks the sheer number of Israelis who have been displaced from their homes in the north is reason for Israel to avoid war. So yeah, basically the fact that Hezbollah has attacked Israel and the fact that Israel had to evacuate I think over 100,000 of Israeli citizens from the north of Gaza, and I think still about 60,000 are still evacuated from the area. That's reason to basically not respond in any way and try to solve it diplomatically. So since I believe Nathan is still Israel, let's go to him first. So what do you think about this tactic? Should Israel just pack up and go home since it's already been so long and there's so many displaced Israelis?
listen, there are so many things to unpack here that it's difficult to know where to start. But I think the kind of so if you kind of want to understand the mindset of this kind of mentality, I think that the way they view wars and the way they view violence is like, okay, well, war is now, erupted somewhere. So now we just have to like put the flames down somehow. Just like, okay, there's violence, there's, force being wielded someplace in the world. Let's just somehow bring it down, and let's just do it with the, least, uh, you know, cost in the short term. So this is, I mean, everything here is just thinking in the short range. So um, I would compare this to kind of a hedonist way of maybe thinking about good and bad. Whatever gives you pleasure is the good, and then whatever gives you pain, that's the bad. And so I don't know if you have a toothache. So I mean that is bad, but then maybe going to the doctor and fixing it will even hurt more. So you're like, no, no, just give me painkillers. That just gives me, the most pleasure. Just give me that. I mean, obviously, that's why we need reason. We can't just go with what feels good and what is painful. So here, I think the argument is really the same. The analogy of the toothache is, I think it's valid because they just think, well, yeah, going to war to actually fix this problem will just, the price or the levels of violence will escalate. That's obvious, and people will even Israel will pay a higher price for doing that. But in the long term, that can actually fix the problem, strategically, to make the violence end once and for all in the case that Israel achieves victory. But it's like they don't think that way. They don't think long term. They don't think like, well, what caused the war? Like, why are these people now evacuated? All these questions of cause and effect, and they just ignore that. They evade those questions.
Yeah, I think we've definitely seen, I think, two aspects, both the complete lack of any philosophy and basically pure pragmatism, just basically let's get us to the status quo as soon as we can. Let's return to the status quo and not think about any solutions. And again, this is what got us here in the first place. If you talk about the 2006 Lebanon War, or even the first one in the 1982, I believe, uh, the pragmatism, the short reach thinking brought us here. And it's the similar when we talk later about October 7th. The fact that nothing has been done, or so little has been done about Hamas for so long, has brought us here. Maybe let me go to Nicolas right now. Uh, what is the solution? Why do they think like that? Why can't they see what we see?
I think you said it well when you identified the problem here as short-range thinking. There are all these calls for ceasefires, calls for diplomacy. What are they actually supposed to achieve? I think there's this widespread perspective that the only thing you need to achieve peace is the absence of war. Well, that's not the case. If you think of a more of domestic parallel, let's suppose you have criminals running rampant in the city, drug dealers, gangs. What's the situation? Is it simply to avoid any altercation with the criminals? No, the police have to go out and arrest the criminals, take them off the streets, put them in prison, etc. The way to achieve peace is not simply to avoid wars between countries or between states and non-state actors. The troublemakers, the evildoers in this case, Islamic totalitarianism, various states that support Islamic totalitarianism, they have to be wiped out, because not only are they a threat to Israel and to Western countries. Now, as you discussed a little while ago, Cyprus is now being threatened by Hezbollah. If Israel falls, then the West is next, Europe, and eventually even North America is next. We need to eradicate the threat by any means possible, whether that means wiping out Hamas, wiping out Hezbollah. That's how you achieve peace. Peace is not simply the absence of war. And it's not just that we're acting in the best interest of Israel or in the best interests of the West. Remember that any kind of totalitarian dictatorship is, in effect, a state of civil war between a government and its citizens. So ultimately, it's in the best interests of Arab citizens, people living in the Middle East, whether it's the young women who are being oppressed in Iran, or the Palestinians who are being oppressed by their own government, as Hamas is. Those threats need to be wiped out. Those totalitarian regimes need to be wiped out. That's what's going to establish peace in the long term.
And yeah, that is something I would. We had an episode about Lebanon is Hezbollah, and if there are any forces within Lebanon, which at least they seem they are against Hezbollah, or within the government against Hezbollah, now's your time. Now's your time to, if you actually do believe that Hezbollah has nothing to do with Lebanon, now is your time to actually stand up against Lebanon with Israel. And I'm wondering if we'll see it happen. But something a little bit more about this is this sort of complete rejection of history of, or basically what's going on. I mean, we knew that basically Hezbollah was supposed to join Hamas on October 7th. They just didn't coordinate on the time, and the only reason Hezbollah didn't go fully in is the fact that at least seemingly America seemed to be behind Israel very strongly, and they were deterred at least a little bit, but they still tried to do something. Uh, but just think about what would happen if they actually did go fully in. I mean, again, 100,000 Israeli citizens had to be evacuated in this sort of like small scale attack. Just imagine if they went fully in. Uh, and if they did, what would Blinken's reaction be? Let's make peace even faster because even more people were displaced. Let's make sure we peace even stronger. Uh, when is it actually okay to respond? Uh, Anders, do you want to tackle any of these questions?
Yeah, there is, as Nathan said, there's a lot to unpack here. I mean, if you look at it face value, it's obviously Blinken statements. They're obviously, I mean, it's pragmatism and innovation in a very untasty soup, if you like. But I mean, the whole thing and the U.S. diplomacy here and going back a long time, obviously, it kind of meets the definition of insanity. If you're trying the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result, right? And that's what we're seeing here. But I think there's one aspect of this that we may underestimate or if not forget, and that is the fact that it's an election year in the US. And I obviously don't have any inside knowledge, but I think Blinken's marching orders is to just make sure that this doesn't get any worse, that it's not blowing up before November. And I would love to be a fly on the wall in the West Wing or wherever they have these talks, but come December or January, I wouldn't, and with if Biden is still in the White House, I wouldn't be surprised to see that a slight change of tack and hopefully more of a support for Israel. There's no guarantees, obviously, because the whole Arab-Israeli question is a conundrum for U.S. foreign policy. I don't want to call them experts, but officials. Overall, I mean, obviously, the path to peace is to number one, crush Iran. And I don't know that Israel can do that on its own. It probably needs the US's help. But in the short term, yeah, go for Hezbollah. I saw in the article that we're discussing that 62% of Israelis are for attacking Hezbollah. And I think, yeah, I mean, it will only get worse the longer they wait. And then they should have done it 10, 15, 20 years ago, or however long ago it was that Hezbollah started to build up their forces in southern Lebanon. And then Blinken is saying that, yeah, it's also will be worse for the people in southern Lebanon, but the people in southern Lebanon are in the same situation as the people in Gaza. They're under the thumb of a totalitarian regime there, and yeah, it will be bad, but that's they started it. That's basically what it comes down to.
Yeah, and it sort of completely blurs the line between the people and the government that represents them. Because again, Hezbollah is the most popular party in Lebanon. So many people do support the actions of Hezbollah. It's not, again, it's not some sort of, while they definitely have dictatorship tendencies, they still live in, I don't know how credible elections are in Lebanon, but at least seemingly uh, uh, there is still some process, and they went through the process and came out very popular. So people there like it. And again, viewing them as sort of like, these people are completely taken over by some foreign party that don't want them there. Again, people seem to want them there, and the government wants them there. Uh, if if I'm wrong, I want to see it. I want to see people rising up against Hezbollah. People, and again, as I said, now's the probably the best time ever. And I think Israel would very much like to see any sort of resistance. I mean, not just within the Lebanese people. Israel's would love to see people rising up in Gaza against Hamas or in the West Bank against Palestinian Authority. They are just so few. So maybe now let's try to tie it a bit more into Gaza and the actual ongoing war, since that's what Blinken did. And so he talked about how he's trying to find a diplomatic resolution to this conflict, uh, and also how important it is to actually reach a Gaza ceasefire, since he believes that uh, the main reason why Hezbollah keeps, or at least at the moment, is still fighting against Israel is that Israel is fighting in Gaza. So we can reach a ceasefire in Gaza, we could reach a diplomatic resolution with Hezbollah. So again, let me go to Nathan first. What do you think about this? Is the solution a ceasefire in Gaza, letting Hamas stay in power?
Well, it's not the solution, no, but the solution for who? So it's not the solution for Israel, but if the problem that you're trying to solve is just to stop the war in the short range, then yeah, that is a sort of a solution, quote unquote. Um, I mean, he is correct that Hezbollah has said from the first day that when Israel ceases fire in Gaza, they will also cease fire. But this shows, I think, how much the Islamists, they actually hold principles. So they have some principles. They're saying, look, we're going with this, and we're not going to compromise on these principles no matter what. And that actually, you can see how powerful principles are, because it dictates the the range of, well, what is possible, or even the range of how people think about this conflict. Yet on the other hand, the West, so there are no principles. They're just like, so you have an aggressor, his demands or whatever, he has some demands and then he's not compromising on them. And in the West, they're saying, okay, well, he has his demands, we have to compromise because his demands are just like our demands, and we must find some common ground. Because they just hold, I mean, they don't think in principles, and they don't view principles as practical tools to accomplish goals in reality. So it's just like a subjectivist kind of, I think Ayn Rand calls this like some sort of a subjectivist egalitarianism. So you just try to compromise between different demands and whims, and just make, because they're all equal. There's no like good or bad whims. So, I mean, it's a very frustrating situation, and I don't know about the recent polls in Israel, but I think a lot of Israelis now have shifted their views, and they're kind of thinking like, yeah, we should just end this war because it's not going anywhere, and we need to release the hostages. So let's just take what we managed to gain so far and just end it at that. I will say, on the other hand, that maybe, because the thing is, like, I personally don't trust the IDF generals right now. I mean, I don't trust the politicians. I don't trust them to do the good things and the really, what's needed to be done in case of a war in the north. I mean, we just saw that, we have a track record of 9 months that they're not doing what's needed to be done in Gaza. So I have a very I'm concerned that if they did start a war, or if they kind of, I don't even think they will start a war. Or I mean, like, they won't launch an offensive, but even if they did, or somehow they were forced to do that, I'm concerned that Israel will not do what needs to be done. Like, they won't just use, unproportional force. They won't use concerted efforts to actually achieve victory against Hezbollah. I think they will wait, like, let's see what Hezbollah is attacking. Is Hezbollah attacking civilian infrastructures? Okay, we'll proportionally attack civilian infrastructures as well. And they'll just, they'll keep their tab on these proportional war games, and that will just lead to disaster. So I want to see more attack-minded generals in the IDF. I know that the IDF has these generals. In the past week, there was actually a big conference in Tel Aviv with IDF commanders in reserves, that they said we need to conduct this war completely differently. Like, why aren't we actually pushing for a victory? So you have these voices, but they're not in the decision-making roles right now, and that's what concerns me. I would like to see them go instead of the people who are running this war right now, and let them lead it, and then we can achieve victory.
So you mentioned this idea of proportionality, and it is how people view it, this idea of proportionality, even though it actually is something different. But people view it as, they kill the X amount of people, we can only kill the X amount of people. And, this is viewed as like the moral thing. But to me, it seems like so disgusting. I mean, it's like if you have it's almost like if they have some spreadsheet, it's like, oh, they killed civilians, 2 points, they killed our soldiers, 1 point, and you count out on the points, and then you pick the enemy targets, so the points equal. This is not how you conduct the war. This is not how you view the enemy side, especially the one that attacked you. Those lives are not worth the same. They support dictatorship. They support, uh, I mean, in this scenario, basically killing all the Jews. And the fact that you view their people and your people as the exact same seems completely insane to me. And yeah, but this does fuel the way Israel conducts the war, and it is why Israel, again, as we said, it's like right now, it's like 7 to 8 months in Gaza, and there is still actual Hamas people in Gaza still living there, breathing. You have the leadership. We didn't Israel didn't get almost any of the actual top leadership, and again, it's so slow because of this uh, idea. But let me go to Nicolas. What do you think?
Whole idea of proportionality in war is it's a moral obscenity. And we've been hearing about this for the past 7 or 8 months, ever since October 8th, when Israel went to war with Gaza. We've been hearing, well, so there were, I don't know how many, 1,200, 1,300 Israelis killed in the attack on October 7th. And every single day we hear in the news trumpeted forth the death toll, the current death toll in Gaza. Now it's 10,000 Palestinians killed. Now it's 20,000. Now it's 30,000. It's irrelevant. Hamas was the aggressor. Hamas was the party that initiated force here. And there's this attempt to create some sort of a moral equivalence between the aggressors and the victims of the aggression. That's really the evil of proportionality. It's not a question of how many were killed on one side, how many were killed on the other side. The question is which party initiated force and which party is defending itself against force. That's the only thing that we should be looking at. Now, the whole problem with Blinken, I mean, I think Blinken is the very model of a modern Secretary of State in the sense that he's an absolute fence sitter. He, on the one hand, from the beginning, he's been saying, yes, the United States supports Israel's right to defend itself. But in the same breath, he says, oh, we should have humanitarian pauses in the conflict so that we can get essential aid to Gaza. He's been criticizing Israel for ruling out a two-state solution. We can all imagine what kind of a disaster that would be. I mean, here we see the consequences of this whole mentality, this whole approach to foreign policy. I think of him in a way as a kind of a spiritual descendant of Neville Chamberlain. You remember he said, we just have to give Hitler what he wants and we will have peace in our time. That's really the mentality that's fueling this Western foreign policy. The idea that all we have to do is show that we're nice, give aid to the people who need it, and put an end to the war, and that's going to solve all of our problems. But it absolutely won't.
Yeah, and on that fact, because also Anders mentioned it earlier with the election coming up, as much as I would like to really speak badly about these politicians, I always have to remind myself that those people are elected. This is what in this case, the American people want. It is the problem with I think, American people themselves and their view of the war, uh, that basically brought us here. Uh, but let me go to Andres now. What do you think about maybe what I said right now about the politicians and the people who vote them in, but also about the Blinken's solution in sense to both Hezbollah and Gaza?
Yeah, so I mean, I agree with you. fundamentally that we get the politicians we deserve. I mean, we are indeed electing them. But in this case, though, I still think I've advocated for this before, and I still think it's the case that there is a silent majority in the U.S. who are very much in support of Israel. And what we see primarily on the left, but also on the right, as expressions against Israel, against the war, the anti-Semitism, I still think that is a very loud but not that significant minority when it comes to numbers. So I think a U.S. president or a presidential candidate or even congressional candidates, they could make some good gains in terms of support if they came out more explicitly in favor of Israel. We see it. We have one senator in Pennsylvania, Fetterman, who has been a staunch Israeli supporter from the beginning of the war, and he's doing very well in the polls in Pennsylvania. And so I think he's proving that it's definitely possible to take a principled stance for Israel and be very successful.
I think altruism plays a major driving force in this. I mean,
absolutely.
Is there any, so, you know, if we go back to the proportionality, is there any other reason? I mean, maybe there are other reasons to accept proportionality in war, but when you just take altruism for granted, that's the only reason, as I can see, that you'll accept this proportionality equation, which is ridiculous. I mean, it's like, because you are more powerful, because you have means that are superior to your enemy, that means that you have to sacrifice and fight in the name of proportionality. But if you're not, if you're in the inferior side, then you don't have to. Then you don't play by the proportional rules, because you can just determine the rules because just you're the weaker one. So, I mean, altruism just plays here a major force, and even I think in regard to the silent majority. So when I look at Israeli society after October 7, everyone was just on board with, we have to achieve victory. We have to go until the end. We cannot accept another October 7. We understand the consequences, and we just can't back down on this thing. I mean, a lot of people were, invoking World War II and giving examples like this is where we are. This is like Pearl Harbor of Israel, and we have to go until the end. But the situation with the hostages, you could see how altruism just kept kind of gnawing at the righteousness of Israelis and the conviction that they have to go to full victory. It was like, well, but there are these hostages, and we do need to sacrifice to save them, because they are in the most need right now. So even if it means, well, we have to kind of put, constraints on our fighting, and we have to reach these ransom agreements with Hamas, well, we'll do it, even if it comes at the price of forfeiting victory. I mean, they don't say it explicitly like that, but that's what's happening. And that's, I think, what happened in the past 8 months, because Israel did start the war relatively on the right foot. It blocked aid. There was no water. There was no electricity. I mean, Gazans were in real trouble. But then the talks, the negotiations to release the hostages, so Israel started to give them water and electricity, and then the aid started pouring in, and it was just like, you could see how the entire war efforts are being dismantled kind of bit by bit, just because you don't stand on your egoistic principles, on your rational principles, to know that, okay, you have this goal, you have to achieve victory, that's the purpose, go for it in all force.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and I think that
Just to back up that what you said, Nathan, about the proportionality only applies to the stronger side, because we don't see any proportionality in the discussion of hostage exchanges for Palestinian murderers and terrorists. You know, there is 1 to 1,000 or something like that.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, even in the exchange that that did happen, was it 1 to 3, which led to the very funny video with Aylan Levy when one reporter said, "Are Palestinians' lives worth less since you're exchanging 1 Israeli for 3 Palestinians?" And again, this was Israeli hostages taken on October 7 to people who committed October 7. So again, the
And
idea of
there was also the discussion about proportionality when Israel freed the liberated the 4 hostages just recently. There was one, I think, news broadcaster. She said to one of the Israeli representatives, "Why didn't you inform the Palestinian population before you went in?" Which was just, I mean, that's altruism. It just makes you dumber.
Yeah, and I think because since since October 7, we've been getting emails from a lot of actually non-objectivists messaging us and realizing how ridiculous this situation is. And oftentimes I've heard them sort of wince back when we talk about the idea that altruism is evil and that altruism is driving this. Uh, and I think it is like so fundamental that as long as it lives, I don't think Israel will ever be able to defend itself fully, because it would require basically saying, yeah, as much as this pains us, hostages have to be second to finishing this war properly, to basically going fully in and making sure that no more hostages in the future will be taken. You cannot, there's no, even a little altruism will corrupt your thinking in this way because it requires so much. Um, so, anything anyone would like to say before we move on? I want to talk about why America is so weak. Uh, all right, let's move on to that one. So, while I was researching this topic, I've seen I was on X, formerly Twitter, and there's a lot of I've seen a bunch of like different videos of specifically Blinken on basically being on stage with like some unsavory people or not that great people, basically calling America evil, like right next to him, and he basically has no reaction, or he doesn't know what to say. He has no he has like no response to that in a sense. And I think it almost seems like because he believes in it, he basically doesn't have what it takes to defend America, which is again why I would go back to altruism. Actually, let me bring up one quote that I was just at OCON, the Objectivist conference, and someone brought up the similar thing when it was, I think, the American President Eisenhower and maybe Gorbachev from the Soviet Union. Yeah, I think it was Gorbachev. I'm not sure right now. And basically, oh no, it was actually the
Khrushchev?
general.
Was it Khrushchev?
No, it was a general, Soviet general, the most famous one. Someone will probably correct me in the chat. But basically, the Soviet Union general was saying something like, we or the people in the Soviet Union, they live for the state, they live for the nation. We all live in a community together. Well, you Americans, you support selfishness. You support, just people doing the things they want. And President Eisenhower didn't have a response to that. He basically didn't have the moral defense of America. And this has happened, in the 50s. And I think it has been going on probably even before. And it's still going on now, where America, because probably still it is one of the most selfish countries, one of the most self-interested countries based on capitalism, based on the pursuit of happiness. There's nothing altruistic about the pursuit of happiness. Because of that, yeah, the American leaders don't have the moral defense for America. Uh, so yeah, I want to talk a little bit about this. How did we, yeah, how did we get here to the point that, yeah, basically someone like Antony Blinken can give, in a sense, no defense of America, and basically anyone can talk badly about America, and yeah, there is no way for the American leaders to defend themselves. Let's start with Nathan.
Maybe someone else wants to start.
Oh,
Sure,
Nathan.
I'll jump
Yeah.
in. What we're seeing today in the world is a consequence of something that Rand warned us about 60 some odd years ago. Anytime you have a confrontation between an evil that's consistent and morally self-righteous on the one hand, and a good that's tepid, weak, inconsistent, unsure of itself, only the evil can win. The side that's the most consistent in its fundamental premises, its fundamental conviction is always going to come out. And that's why compromise is so evil, because when you compromise with evil, the only thing you achieve is evil. So that's one point. So what we really need is a kind of modern day Winston Churchill who will say, we'll fight them in the trenches, we'll fight them. Someone who will stand up for the principles of the West, the Enlightenment principles, the principles that the West stands for: individualism, reason, civilization, against all the barbarism. But unfortunately, there is no such voice anywhere in international politics.
Anders?
Yeah, I like to say that when we're talking about the United States and its self-confidence in dealing with other nations and the world in general, it's in terms of foreign policy, military power, and such. A proper foreign policy doesn't really involve other countries at all. It starts with leading by example at home. And right now we have lost our way. Obviously, we don't have the confidence in doing that. But if, just hypothetically, if we would start to turn things around here at home in terms of protecting and respecting individual rights, rolling back regulations, starting to phase out the massive welfare state programs that we have. Now, obviously, this will require a radical philosophical shift. But if and when we would do that, you would obviously see economic growth would skyrocket in this country. And we would be stronger economically. It would be less costly to defend ourselves. And what we've seen in the past, we saw it in the 19th century, the world got inspired by the American Revolution, and it took a while, but a lot of countries had their own revolutions. Most of them failed, unfortunately. But overall, the influence that America has had on the world over the past 200 years, it started at home. And if we want to recapture that righteousness and philosophical confidence, it again has to start at home. And then everything else will pretty much fall in place.
Yeah, look,
Yeah, I mean, oh, go on.
I think altruism leads to a lack of self-esteem. I mean, think about it like it literally disconnects the mind to morality, like to what is good for you. Because if you just think about, so if you're an altruist and you're trying to pursue values in the world, values for you, for yourself, you're trying to improve your life, you'll at some point there will be someone who says, well, you have a moral duty to help others. You have a moral duty to give up your values that you're pursuing. You have a moral duty to do these things that you use your mind in order to achieve them and gain them. But now you have to kind of give up on those things. And you're having like this disconnection between your mind and the good and your values. And if you're starting to give up values and you're starting to even lose the passion to pursue values. And what subsequently happens is that you lose your self-esteem, because you're just you're starting to think, well, I'm no good. I cannot achieve these values. I cannot achieve a kind of life where, and I'm not, I don't deserve to achieve this kind of life. So it leads to a lack of pride and a lack of self-esteem. And then these leaders, they receive these accusations, and they don't have anything to say, because they lack self-esteem. They cannot defend their own values, because they believe that they need to renounce these values. And to listeners of this show who are not objectivists, I implore you to really check your premises, read Ayn Rand's novels, read Ayn Rand's books. And, if what we're saying right now, if our arguments sound rational to you, if they sound logical, if you like some of them, I would recommend you check how we reach these conclusions, on what basis, on what facts, what fundamental principles. And I mean, I don't expect anyone to just hear us say, altruism is bad, egoism is good, and just accept it. And yeah, like you will need to probably go through a long process of actually integrating what that means. What does egoism mean? What does altruism means? But read it. It's important. Like, that's the only way we can actually save Western civilization. It's the only way we can save the Enlightenment and the ideas that sprung in Greece.
Yeah, and so just to talk a little bit more about, yeah, there was this idea of, the American exceptionalism, the American dream, this sort of American, like, unique identity that basically, you had a bunch of like free nations, yet America was viewed as like, this is the free nations where people from all over the world come in and basically can can find their way no matter what their background is. And that has been something that America has been losing. I think Jeroen Brook talked about how, yeah, still in like the 90s there was this sort of unique American basically way of life, or the attitude towards life. And even he's been saying that, yeah, in the last couple of years and decades, basically America has become European, in the sense that it has become, as any other, yeah, maybe free nation, still free nation, still Western nation, but a sort of not exceptional in this way. And I think this is one of the reasons behind why even the American leaders have for a long time lost this idea that America is exceptional and is different from even the other free nations. Um, so maybe to bring us back a little bit, now that we talked about America, uh, we still have some time, so maybe we can talk a little bit more about Hezbollah. So Blinken has said that the threat from Hezbollah is making life impossible, Blinken said, as there are many people in southern Lebanon who are also not able to live in their homes and towns. Uh, and again, so this could bring it back to the idea that it's similar to Gaza in the fact that these people do support Hezbollah. They do support what Hezbollah has been doing. But again, I would, if I had a question for uh, for Blinken, it would be that, yeah, what should be done about it if we actually want to see this sort of peace in the Middle East? What should happen? And maybe we'll go one last time around the table to hear some parting thoughts. Do you wanna start again, Nathan?
Sure. I mean, this is just a popular view, that it's become conventional that there's a separation between politics and the citizens, and it's like these two different entities. It's like they don't even live in the same country. Like, you have the politicians, they live they have their own kind of community, and then you have the civilians who are engaged in this kind of happy kumbaya hippie community. And like we just cannot place any moral responsibility or causal responsibility on their actions and tie the connection between politics and the civilians. And even libertarians have this in their foreign policy views. But at the end of the day, every individual, he has moral responsibility for the way that his society is organized, the way that politics is organized. He needs to. I mean, that's why politics is important. That's why you go to vote, because you vote in democracies, because politics is the way that we can, live in a free. I mean, if we want to live in a free society, we need to make sure that politics is free, that we can actually then go about and pursue our own values and pursue our goals and live happy lives. But if you just ignore that, if you about what's going on in politics, or I mean, I'm not saying that everyone should be go study political science, like that's not my claim, but you need to have some sort of understanding. Well, what's going on? Like, what are these politicians doing? Because it actually affects your life, your personal individual life. So you have some moral responsibility to understand what happens and to try to influence politics, to try to change the culture if you think that it's going, if it's heading into the wrong direction. And so going back to Lebanon, these civilians, they have a responsibility, a moral responsibility for the actions of their leaders. And they cannot just shirk their responsibility. If anything happens to them, that's the blame. I mean, I guess you could place the primary blame on Hezbollah, but they have a blame too. And in any case, Israel needs to fight from an egoist, rational perspective, which is to defend the rights to their own life. And it cannot, it cannot sacrifice its life for the sake of people who did not take moral responsibility to change their political system.
Can I add something to that? So for months and months, we've been hearing in the mass media and social media about all the innocent Palestinians who've been killed in the Hamas war. But as Harry Binswanger pointed out to me some weeks ago, I mean, really, there are no innocent Palestinians. The children aside, any Palestinian males who are above a certain age are potential recruits for Hamas. They're potential enemies of Israel. And I wouldn't be surprised if the situation with Hezbollah was very similar. Another factor which has made the war in Gaza so complicated is the fact that Hamas tends to use civilian shields. They hide in heavily populated areas among civilians. And so when Israelis are trying to kill Hamas leaders and soldiers, there are inevitable civilian casualties. And I would be worried that in a war between Israel and Hezbollah, the same thing would happen, because Hezbollah, they're sort of spread out throughout the country among the civilian population. And undoubtedly, if there were a war between Israel and Lebanon, schools would be hit, hospitals would be hit, and we'd get the same outrage from the international community that Israel is killing innocent Lebanese citizens. I mean, you can already see the headlines in the news.
Yeah, I hate to do spoilers from Atlas Shrugged, so I'll try to do it a bit as unambiguous as possible. But this idea of basically that the civilians are in this sort of that they don't know what to do. Reminds me of there is one scene where I'll just say one person basically points a gun at someone and say, "Move, like move away, and I won't shoot you." And that other person is like, but I'm supposed to be here, but oh, I don't want to shoot you," and is completely paralyzed and is not doing anything. And it ends up that the first person shoots him because basically the choice was made for him. And in the same way, I would talk to the Lebanese citizens, the ones who do believe that Hezbollah shouldn't be in their country, that Hezbollah has no business being there. Now is the time to act. And when you will paralyze yourselves, when you refrain yourselves from doing any decision, someone will make the decision for you. That's why it's important to actually act when you can. So Anders, any parting words from you about this?
Yeah, I hear Nathan's concern that, and I think Nicolas to some extent too, that attacking Hezbollah will just bog down Israel in another in Gaza 2.0, but maybe worse because they're more armed and perhaps more powerful than Hamas is. But you have to start at some point, because this will only get worse. Hezbollah will get stronger and stronger, and the consequences will be more severe the longer Israel waits. Yeah, with all the caveats that have been mentioned and such, and the internal strife within Israel and between different factions, but I think, please start earlier rather than later, because this is not only a fight for Israel, this is a fight for the survival and thriving of Western civilization.
I mean,
I think
war with Hezbollah, I think, is inevitable. If it doesn't happen this year, it will happen in the future, unless some black swan event that nobody can expect, and then prevents the war. But as the ideas right now are kind of moving both groups and just the intentions of Hezbollah, Iran, the Islamists, this is inevitable. It will happen in the future. I'll just say that reports from Israel do indicate that the IDF generals understand that this war needs to be swift, it needs to be fast. Israel cannot afford a very long war with Hezbollah because the amount of force that they can actually, and the amount of damage that they can inflict on Israel is a lot worse than Hamas. So they have to actually do this really fast. And I think they understand it, but I don't know if they have the moral conviction and the kind of, what really the courage to do it, which is why I'm concerned about war with Hezbollah. I mean, other than the actual consequences of the war. But look, I think if war does erupt between Israel and Hezbollah, or I should say Israel and Lebanon, really. So if war erupts, it might be such a full scale and such an incredible amount of force that I'm not sure the news is going to able to follow any hospital that gets hit in that case, because it will be a really big, lots of firepower in that war.
Yeah, and it's important to, because you mentioned the war is inevitable. Yeah, the whole reason why Hezbollah exists is to fight against Israel. So thinking that we could just make peace and hopefully they'll give up on their struggle is probably not something that will happen. And so I talked about the idea of basically that someone will make a choice for you if you don't act. And while I mentioned it when it comes to Lebanese civilians, it actually applies to Israel itself. If Israel doesn't act, someone will act upon it. And the only way to prevent it is to prevent it and to make sure the threat is dealt with before it can be existential, as it has been many times in the Israeli past. And I hoped we are past the idea that Israel is an existential threat, but it's still very much here. So I think we're about to wrap up. So make me go around the table and ask Nathan, where can people find you?
I have a Substack. It's called the Enlightened Examiner, or Twitter, same handle, the Enlightened Examiner, and yeah, that's pretty much it.
Nicolas, where can people find you?
Okay, two things very quickly. My Ocon talk from last year is now available on YouTube, on my YouTube channel. Perhaps we can put the link in the description. And my Ocon talk from this past week is not on YouTube yet, but there was a preview video that I did a couple of weeks ago with my friend Jonathan Dawn. And Daniel, I'll send you the link for that. Perhaps we can also include that, as it was sort of a preview just to get people excited and interested in my topic, and it's definitely well worth checking out.
I heard it was excellent.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Anders, where can people find you?
You can find me at andersingemarsson.substack.com, and you can find my book, Think Right or Wrong, Not Left or Right, on any Amazon outlet around the world, ebook, paperback, or audiobook.
And also thank you, Jonathan, for your super chat. Thank you, Christopher, for your super chat, and thank you, Kathleen, for your super chat. So you'll be able to find all the links. Oh, and also you can find me on YouTube. Just Google Damned Dan and just look for channels, and you should be able to find me. But as I said, you'll be able to find all the links in the description. So thank you
Google
guys
what though? I
for...
didn't hear.
Sorry?
Google what to find you?
Damned Dan. It's actually, funny enough, it's actually one of the characters from one of the Ayn Rand's short stories. One of my favorite ones. So it's the one to definitely check out. So thank you guys for joining me today. We'll be back tomorrow with another episode of The Daily Objective. Thank you for watching, and bye-bye.